Liam felt the cold of the polished church pew seep through his thin suit, a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. It was the cold of finality, the hollow ache of a world without his grandfather. Arthur was gone. The only man who had ever shown him unconditional kindness, the man who had raised him when his own parents could not, was now just a memory encased in a dark mahogany box at the front of the nave. Liam's gaze was fixed on it, his vision blurred by a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on his chest, making each breath a conscious, painful effort. Beside him, a sharp, impatient sigh cut through his sorrow like a shard of glass. It was his wife, Sophia. She shifted in her seat, the rustle of her expensive designer dress a jarring sound in the solemn silence. She was not looking at the casket. Her eyes were scanning the other mourners, her expression a mixture of boredom and faint disgust, as if she were evaluating the quality of the guests at a party that had failed to meet her standards. She looked utterly out of place, a vibrant predatory orchid in a field of somber wildflowers. "Can you at least try to look presentable?" she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss that was for his ears alone. "People are watching. Your face is all blotchy." Liam didn't respond. He couldn't. The words were trapped somewhere behind the lump in his throat. He just wanted to be alone with his memories of Arthur, of summer afternoons spent learning to fix old clocks, of the quiet wisdom shared over mugs of hot tea. But Sophia's presence was a constant, grating reminder of a different reality, one built on appearances and transactions. Her brother Caleb sat on her other side, a carbon copy of his sister's disdainful attitude, packaged in a suit that probably cost more than Liam's car. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes not on the altar, but on the few well-dressed attendees in the front rows, business associates of his own, not friends of Arthur. "Not much of a turnout," Caleb murmured to Sophia, loud enough for Liam to hear. "I thought the old man had more influence than this." "He had influence with mechanics and librarians, Caleb," Sophia scoffed quietly. "Not the kind that matters." Their cruelty was a familiar poison, one Liam had learned to metabolize over the 7 years of their marriage. He had once mistaken Sophia's ambition for strength, her sharp edges for a worldly confidence he lacked. He had been a fool. He had been a project for her, a piece of malleable clay she thought she could shape into a man worthy of standing beside her. When he had failed to harden into the desired form, content with his modest job and simple life, her disappointment had curdled into contempt. After the service, at the small, awkward reception held in a rented hall, the humiliation continued. Sophia and Caleb moved through the room like circling sharks, offering condolences that sounded more like judgments. They ignored Liam completely, leaving him to stand alone by a window, clutching a cold cup of coffee. He watched as Sophia cornered Arthur's longtime lawyer, Mr. Thompson, a kind, elderly man with weary eyes. He saw her gesturing emphatically, her voice low, but her intent clear. She was already circling the assets, her grief a transparently false mask for her avarice. The will reading was scheduled for the following week, a formality that Liam dreaded. He knew his grandfather didn't have much, just the small house he lived in, a few savings, and a lifetime of collected odds and ends. Liam wanted none of it. He only wanted the man back. But for Sophia, this was the main event, the final accounting of what the old man was worth to her in cold, hard cash. They sat in Mr. Thompson's stuffy, book-lined office. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. Liam sat stiffly in a leather chair that creaked like an old church door, feeling small and out of place. Sophia, however, looked perfectly at home. She tapped her manicured nails on the polished surface of the mahogany desk, exuding an aura of impatient entitlement. Caleb was there too, acting as her silent, smirking reinforcement. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, peering over his spectacles. He read through the legal jargon with a somber, steady voice. The house, as expected, was to be sold, the proceeds divided. The savings were modest. Then came the final items. "To my beloved grandson Liam," Mr. Thompson read, his voice softening with genuine affection. "I leave the contents and ownership of the storage unit facility at 1450 Industrial Way, a property that has been in our family for generations.
May it serve you as well as it has served us." A beat of stunned silence filled the room. Sophia's perfectly sculpted face twisted into a mask of disbelief, then outright fury. "A storage unit!" she spat, the words dripping with venom. "A broken-down, rat-infested shed on the edge of nowhere? That's it," Mr. Thompson continued, his voice unwavering. "And to Sophia, in recognition of her companionship to my grandson, Arthur has left the remainder of his liquid assets, the penthouse apartment where you both reside, and the vehicle." Sophia's anger momentarily subsided, replaced by a smug, triumphant smirk. She had gotten what she wanted, the tangible, flashy symbols of wealth, the penthouse, the car, the cash. She looked at Liam with pitying contempt. "Well," she said, her voice like honey laced with arsenic, "I suppose that's fair?"
"To each what they deserve." Mr. Thompson slid a small, tarnished ring of keys across the desk toward Liam. "These are for the unit, Liam." Before Liam could reach for them, Sophia snatched them up. She stood, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She walked over to Liam, who remained seated, and dangled the keys in front of his face. "Here you go, darling," she sneered. "The keys to your kingdom." Then, with a final theatrical flourish of cruelty, she let them drop. They clattered onto the floor at his feet, a dull, metallic sound that echoed the shattering of his last shred of dignity. Caleb chuckled, a low, ugly sound. Sophia turned and walked out of the office without a backward glance, her brother trailing in her wake like a loyal jackal. Liam stared at the keys on the worn carpet. One of them was large and rusted, the other small and ordinary. Attached to the ring was a heavy, old-fashioned brass tag, tarnished with age. It had a strange, intricate pattern etched into it, almost like a maze. For a long moment, he didn't move. The public humiliation layered on top of his grief was a crushing weight. He felt the sting of tears behind his eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of anyone. Slowly, deliberately, he bent down and picked up the keys, their cold metal, a stark reality in his trembling hand. This was all he had left of his grandfather. A broken-down storage unit and a set of old keys. His life with Sophia had been a long, slow erosion of his own identity. He had met her at a university fundraiser. He was a promising architectural student, full of dreams of designing beautiful, sustainable buildings. She was in business school, dazzling and ambitious, with a razor-sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. She had seen potential in him, not as an artist, but as a future earner, a man who could build the foundation for the empire she intended to rule. He had been captivated, blinded by a confidence he had never possessed. He abandoned his final year of graduate school to take a high-paying but soul-crushing job in construction management, all to finance the lifestyle she demanded. The penthouse apartment with its panoramic city views, the European cars, the designer wardrobe, the exclusive club memberships. It was all funded by his grueling 60-hour work weeks. His drafting table gathered dust in a corner, a silent monument to a forgotten dream. Sophia had never been shy about her disdain for his family. She called his grandfather the Relic, a dusty old man from a bygone era. She refused to visit the small, cluttered house where Liam had grown up, calling it a hovel. She made fun of Arthur's simple, frugal ways, his patched-up sweaters and his love for gardening. To her, a person's worth was measured by their net worth, and Arthur, in her eyes, was worth nothing. Now, sitting in his car outside the lawyer's office, the weight of those years pressed down on him. He had given up everything for her, and in return she had given him nothing but scorn. The divorce papers would be coming soon. She had made that clear. She would take the penthouse, the money, everything, and he would be left with a storage unit. Caleb and Sophia were a matched set, convinced of their own superiority. They had recently launched a boutique development firm, Crestview Properties, funded by a series of risky loans and a handful of investors they had charmed with their slick presentations and social connections. Their entire worldview was built on a fragile scaffolding of image and perception. They didn't build things of substance, they built brands. They believed they were titans of industry in the making, destined for the cover of magazines. Their contempt for Liam was rooted in this belief system. He was old world, a relic like his grandfather, a man who believed in hard work, quiet dignity, and tangible skills. In their eyes, he was an anchor holding Sophia back from her glorious destiny. A week later, Liam was served with the divorce papers, just as he had expected. He was also given a formal notice to vacate the penthouse within 30 days. The legal documents were cold and brutal. Sophia was demanding alimony, citing the lifestyle to which she had become accustomed. It was a staggering display of audacity. She was taking everything and still demanding more. He packed his few belongings into cardboard boxes while she was out. His books, his old architectural drawings, the framed photo of him and his grandfather on a fishing trip. Every object was a memory of a life he had lived before Sophia. When she came home that evening, she found him taping up the last box. She didn't offer to help. She just stood in the doorway of the cavernous living room, arms crossed, tapping her foot. "Don't forget to leave the key fob on the counter," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "And don't think for a second you're getting away without paying what you owe me. My lawyer will be in touch." "What I owe you?" Liam asked, his voice quiet but steady. The fog of grief was beginning to clear, replaced by a slow-burning anger. "For 7 years of my life," she said, as if the answer were obvious. "For elevating you, you should be grateful." He didn't argue. There was no point. It would be like arguing with a storm. He simply nodded, picked up his boxes, and walked out of the life they had built together. He didn't look back. With nowhere else to go, he drove to the one place that was his, 1450 Industrial Way. The address led him to a forgotten corner of the city, a place of cracked pavement and chain-link fences. And there it was. It wasn't just a single storage unit, it was a long, low-slung brick building, a facility with perhaps 50 rusted, corrugated metal doors. A faded sign above the small, boarded-up office read, "Arthur's Secure Storage." The entire property was surrounded by a high, rusty fence, and the gate was secured with a heavy chain and a formidable-looking padlock. It looked exactly as Sophia had described it, broken down and neglected. Weeds grew high along the fence line, and several of the unit doors were dented and graffitied. A sense of despair washed over him. This was his inheritance. This was his kingdom. He used the large, rusted key from the ring to open the padlock on the gate. It groaned in protest, but finally gave way. He drove his car inside and parked near the office. He tried the smaller key on the office door, but it was boarded up from the inside. He walked the length of the building, checking the numbers on the doors. At the very end, he found Unit 1, which had a different, more robust lock. The same small key fit perfectly. The metal door rolled up with a deafening screech, revealing a space choked with dust and shadows. It was packed to the ceiling with old furniture covered in white sheets, stacked boxes, and forgotten junk. It looked like the final resting place for a lifetime of accumulated possessions. But in the center of the room, there was a small, clear space. In it sat a single object, his grandfather's old roll-top desk. A wave of nostalgia hit him. He remembered sitting at that desk as a boy, drawing pictures while his grandfather paid bills or wrote letters. He ran his hand over the worn wood, the familiar scratches and dents, a map of his childhood. He sat in the old wooden chair, which creaked under his weight. He tried to open the drawers, but they were all locked. He tried the key from the office door, but it didn't fit. Then he remembered the brass tag on the key ring. He had barely looked at it before. He pulled the keys from his pocket and examined it under the dim light from the open door. The intricate pattern wasn't just decoration. It was a map, a series of lines and symbols. And in the very center, there was a tiny, almost invisible keyhole. It was a puzzle key. He looked closer at the tag and saw that parts of it could be twisted and turned. Following the lines of the maze-like pattern, he manipulated the small brass pieces until, with a soft click, a tiny, ornate key popped out from the side of the tag. His heart pounded in his chest. This was something more than just a key tag. This was a message. He took the tiny key and tried it on the central drawer of the desk. It slid in smoothly. He turned it, and with another soft click, the lock disengaged. Not just the central drawer, but all of them. A mechanism inside had unlocked the entire desk. He slid open the main drawer. It was not filled with old bills or pens. Instead, it contained a series of neatly organized folders. He pulled one out. The label on it read, "Deeds." Inside were thick, vellum documents, filled with elaborate script and official seals. He read the top one. It was a deed of ownership for the land at 1450 Industrial Way. But it wasn't just for the plot the building sat on. It was for the entire parcel, a tract of land that, according to the map attached, stretched for acres behind the building all the way to the river. In another folder labeled Surveys, he found geological reports and city planning documents from decades past. In a third, marked Corporate, were papers for a company called Eleanor Holdings, LLC. Eleanor was his grandmother's name. He kept digging, his initial confusion turning into a dawning, electrifying sense of wonder. This was not a junkyard. This was an archive. At the very bottom of the drawer, he found a thick, sealed envelope. On the front, in his grandfather's familiar, spidery handwriting, were 2 words. For Liam. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a letter, several pages long. "My dearest Liam," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the world has surely lost some of its shine. I hope you are well. I know the last few years have been difficult for you. I have watched you sacrifice your dreams for a woman who does not value the heart of the man you are. I have remained silent because it was your life to live, but I have not been idle." The letter went on to explain everything. His grandfather, a man Liam had always thought of as a simple handyman, had been an incredibly astute, patient investor. He never trusted banks or the stock market. He trusted land. Over 50 years, he had used his modest savings to quietly purchase unwanted, overlooked parcels of land around the city, holding them under the radar in the Eleanor Holdings Shell Corporation. The storage unit was the only property he had ever actively managed, and he had let it fall into disrepair intentionally to make it seem worthless, to keep it from drawing unwanted attention. "This land, Liam," the letter continued, "is your true inheritance. Not just this plot, but several others. But this one is the most important. I have been following the city's development plans for years. They are going to build the new transit hub less than a mile from here. This forgotten industrial zone is about to become the most valuable real estate in the city. They will come to you, Liam. They will want to buy. Do not sell for the first price they offer. Your grandmother and I bought this land for pennies. It is now worth a fortune. A man named Thomas Thompson, my lawyer and oldest friend, holds the rest of the paperwork. He knows everything. Go to him. He will guide you." The final paragraph made Liam's breath catch in his throat. "I have left your wife the flashy things she craves. The apartment, the car, they are temporary, they will fade. But land, Liam, land is permanent. It is real. Use this gift wisely. Reclaim the life you were meant to live. Build things that are beautiful and lasting. Be the man I always knew you were. With all my love, Grandpa Arthur." Liam sat back in the creaking chair, the letter clutched in his hand. The dusty, forgotten storage unit was suddenly transformed. It was no longer a symbol of his failure, but a fortress of his grandfather's love and foresight. The air, thick with the smell of decay just moments before, now seemed to hum with possibility. He looked around at the junk and the shadows, and for the first time in a very long time, he saw a future. Meanwhile, Sophia and Caleb were on top of the world. They had just secured the final round of funding for their flagship project, the Pinnacle, a massive, ultra-luxury, mixed-use development that promised to redefine the city's skyline. They had schmoozed and charmed, leveraging every connection they had. Their success hinged on acquiring a large, contiguous block of land in the newly rezoned industrial district, the very district where Arthur's storage unit stood. They had already purchased several smaller lots, but the centerpiece, the largest and most crucial parcel, remained stubbornly out of reach. It was owned by an obscure holding company, Eleanor Holdings, LLC, and their inquiries had been met with silence. "It's a ghost company," Caleb complained to Sophia one evening as they sipped champagne in the penthouse Liam had paid for. "Probably some old-timer who doesn't even know what he's sitting on. We just need to find him and wave enough cash in his face. Everyone has a price." "Then find him," Sophia commanded, her voice sharp. "Our entire projection is based on acquiring that plot. The investors are getting anxious. Don't fail me, Caleb." She had no idea how close the owner was. She had, in fact, thrown the keys to his kingdom at his feet. The next morning, Liam walked into Mr. Thompson's office. He was a different man from the one who had sat there a week before. The grief was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but the despair was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He placed the letter and the deeds on the lawyer's desk. Mr. Thompson read the letter, a slow, sad smile spreading across his face. "Arthur was the smartest man I ever knew," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and the most patient. He always saw 10 steps ahead of everyone else." He then laid out the full extent of it. The transit hub announcement was imminent. The city was about to pour billions into infrastructure in the area. The land Liam owned wasn't just valuable, it was the keystone for the entire redevelopment of the city's south side. A major national developer had already submitted a confidential standing offer of $90 million for the plot.
$90 million? Liam whispered, the number sounding unreal. "And that's just their opening bid," Thompson said with a glint in his eye. "Arthur wanted you to have this, Liam. He wanted you to be secure. He wanted you to be free." Then Thompson leaned forward, his expression turning serious. There's another interested party, Liam, a new local firm. They've been making inquiries for months, very aggressive, a company called Crestview Properties. Liam's blood ran cold. That's my wife's company, he said, his voice barely audible, and her brother's. Mr. Thompson's eyebrows shot up. He sat back in his chair, a look of profound understanding dawning on his face. He let out a long, low whistle. "Oh, Arthur," he murmured to himself. "You magnificent old fox! The irony is almost poetic." He looked at Liam, his eyes sharp. Their entire project, the one they've staked their reputation and their investors' money on, is completely dependent on your land.
Without it, they are bankrupt. The room was silent for a long moment as the full weight of the situation settled over Liam. He saw it all with perfect clarity, the years of condescension, the public shaming, the final, cruel act of dropping the keys at his feet. They thought he was nothing. They thought he was a worthless footnote in their grand story. But he wasn't the footnote. He was the entire book. A slow, cold smile touched Liam's lips for the first time in months. It was not a smile of happiness, but of pure, unadulterated resolve. The sleeping giant inside him was finally awake. "She wants a lifestyle to which she's become accustomed," he said, softly, quoting her own words back to the empty air. "All right, let's talk about a plan, Mr. Thompson. I don't just want to sell the land, I want to deliver a message." The strategy session was short and surgical. Liam's instructions were simple. Mr. Thompson, acting as the sole representative of the mysterious Eleanor Holdings, would make contact with Crestview Properties. He would signal that the owner was finally ready to sell, but that he was a very private, eccentric man who would only negotiate through his lawyer. The price would be high, but just within the realm of possibility for Sophia and Caleb, enough to make them stretch every last cent of credit they had. "We will let them get right to the edge of the cliff," Liam said, his voice steady and hard. "We will let them stare down at the beautiful view of their future, and then we will let their own greed push them over." Mr. Thompson, who had seen his share of bitter legal battles, looked at the young man before him with a newfound respect. He saw the steel of his old friend Arthur shining in Liam's eyes. "It will be my distinct pleasure, son," he said. The first move was made the next day. An email, formal and brief, arrived in Caleb's inbox. It was from the law offices of Thomas Thompson, stating that his client, the owner of 1450 Industrial Way, was now entertaining offers. Caleb and Sophia were ecstatic. "I told you," Caleb crowed, waving his phone in the air. "The old ghost finally came out of the woodwork. He's ready to sell." "Don't celebrate yet," Sophia cautioned, though a triumphant smirk was already playing on her lips. "Nail him down! Get it in writing! I want that land, Caleb. I don't care what it costs. This is our moment." The negotiations began. Mr. Thompson was a master. He was polite but firm, creating an aura of an incredibly wealthy, slightly senile client who was difficult but ultimately willing to make a deal. He set the price at a staggering $25 million, well above market value, but a price he knew they couldn't walk away from without their entire project imploding. Caleb, puffed up with self-importance, tried to bully and lowball. Thompson didn't budge. "My client is in no hurry to sell," he would say calmly. "He has held this land for 50 years. He can hold it for 50 more. The price is the price." Panicked, Sophia and Caleb scrambled. They went back to their investors, presenting the deal as a major victory. They took out secondary loans at exorbitant interest rates. They leveraged every asset they had, including the penthouse. They poured every last drop of their financial and social capital into meeting the price. Finally, they agreed. A preliminary contract was drawn up. Mr. Thompson insisted on a non-refundable deposit of $5 million and a strict 30-day closing window. It was aggressive, but Sophia and Caleb were so blinded by their apparent victory that they didn't see the trap being laid. They saw it as the final hurdle before their triumph. They signed the papers and wired the $5 million. That night, Liam received a text message from Sophia. It was a photo of her and Caleb raising champagne glasses in the penthouse, their faces flushed with success. The caption read, "Celebrating the deal of a lifetime. Some people just know how to win. Hope you're enjoying the dump." Liam looked at the photo, at her smug, arrogant face. He felt nothing, no anger, no pain, just a profound, cold distance. He deleted the message and went back to the architectural sketches he had started working on, his first new designs in 7 years. The 30-day closing window began to shrink. Liam and Thompson let them sweat for 3 weeks. Then, with 10 days to go, the second phase of the plan was initiated. Thompson contacted Caleb with a list of new, complex but perfectly legal stipulations his eccentric client was now demanding. There were environmental impact studies, soil analysis reports, and historical preservation surveys that needed to be completed and certified before the final sale. Caleb was apoplectic. "This is ridiculous," he shouted over the phone at Thompson. "We have a deal. You can't just add new conditions." "My client is concerned about the legacy of the land," Thompson replied smoothly, his voice a placid sea against Caleb's storm of rage. "He wants to ensure the new development will be appropriate. As per the clause in your preliminary agreement, all due diligence is the responsibility of the buyer. The closing date remains firm." Panic set in. The required reports would take months to complete, not days. Sophia and Caleb tried everything. They called Thompson relentlessly. They sent threatening legal letters. They even showed up at his office, demanding to speak with the owner. Thompson's receptionist politely but firmly turned them away. They were trapped. The deadline was approaching like a freight train, and they were tied to the tracks. Their investors, hearing whispers of the complications, started getting nervous. The bank that had provided the bridge loan for the purchase began making inquiries. The fragile empire of Crestview Properties started to show cracks. Liam watched it all from a distance. He had rented a small, simple apartment and was spending his days at the storage unit, sorting through his grandfather's belongings and working on his designs. He felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He was disconnected from the chaos engulfing Sophia and Caleb, an unseen force directing a quiet, inevitable storm. The day the deadline expired was a Tuesday. It passed without fanfare. At 5:01 p.m., Mr. Thompson sent a certified letter to Crestview Properties, informing them that they were in breach of contract. The deal was terminated. The $5 million deposit was forfeited as per the signed agreement. The first domino had fallen. The sound of its impact was immediate and catastrophic. The news of the failed deal spread like wildfire through the city's financial community. Their primary investor, a ruthless venture capitalist, immediately pulled his funding and filed a lawsuit for gross mismanagement and fraud. The bank called in their loans, demanding immediate repayment. With no capital and no assets left to leverage, Crestview Properties imploded. Within 48 hours, they were insolvent. The cascade was brutal and swift. They were locked out of their rented office space. The company cars were repossessed. A lien was placed on the penthouse. Sophia and Caleb, the darlings of the city's development scene, were ruined. Liam saw the news on a local business report. A stern-faced journalist detailed the spectacular collapse of Crestview Properties, calling it a cautionary tale of hubris and over-leverage. A picture of a harried-looking Sophia flashed on the screen. She looked 10 years older. His phone began to ring. It was her. He let it go to voicemail. A message appeared, then another and another. They started as panicked and confused, then quickly escalated to furious and accusatory. "What did you do, Liam? This has to be you. You did this to me. You will pay for this." He listened to the messages once, his face impassive. Then he deleted them. It was just noise. The real reckoning was yet to come. The setting for the final act was a sterile, impersonal courtroom for their divorce hearing. Liam sat beside Mr. Thompson, dressed in a simple but well-fitting suit. He was calm, his posture relaxed. Across the aisle, Sophia and Caleb looked like ghosts. Their expensive clothes hung on them, their faces were pale and drawn, their eyes burning with a desperate, hateful energy. They had lost everything, but their arrogance remained, a final, pathetic shield against their reality. Their lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, was making a last-ditch effort to salvage something from the wreckage. He painted Sophia as the victim, a talented businesswoman whose career had been sabotaged, leaving her destitute. He argued that Liam, despite his modest means, should be responsible for a significant alimony payment to support her. "Mr. Parker," the judge said, looking over at Liam with a tired expression, "your financial disclosures list your occupation as a construction manager and your primary asset as an inheritance of a commercial storage facility. Is that correct?" "It is, Your Honor," Liam said calmly. Sophia snorted audibly. "A garbage dump," she muttered to her lawyer, loud enough for the whole court to hear. The judge frowned at her outburst. "Mr. Thompson," she said, turning to Liam's lawyer, "does your client have anything to add regarding his financial situation?" Mr. Thompson stood slowly. He was no longer just a kindly old lawyer. He was an instrument of justice. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "We do have a slight update to my client's financial disclosure." He placed a single folder on the clerk's desk. Mr. Parker's primary asset, the storage facility at 1450 Industrial Way, is more accurately described as the entire parcel of land upon which the facility sits. That parcel of land was sold 2 days ago to a national real estate conglomerate. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent courtroom. The final sale price was $91 million. A collective gasp went through the room. Sophia's jaw dropped. Her face went white with shock. Caleb stared, his mouth agape, looking as if he had been struck by lightning. The judge's eyes widened. She looked from the folder to Liam, then back to Thompson. 91 million? That is correct, Your Honor, Thompson continued, his voice as smooth as silk. But that is not the most pertinent detail here. He turned his gaze slowly, deliberately, to lock eyes with Sophia and Caleb. You see, before we accepted that offer, we were in negotiations with another party, a promising local developer called Crestview Properties. The color drained completely from Caleb's face. Sophia began to tremble, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified understanding. Crestview Properties was so confident in their ability to acquire the land that they staked their entire venture on it. Thompson went on, his tone becoming a clinical recitation of facts. They took on massive debt. They made binding promises to investors. They even signed a preliminary purchase agreement with a substantial, non-refundable deposit. Unfortunately for them, they were unable to meet the conditions of the contract by the closing date. They defaulted. They lost their deposit, their investors, their company, and their reputation. A truly tragic case of mismanagement. He let the silence hang for a moment longer before delivering the final, devastating blow. They spent months trying to discover the identity of the mysterious, reclusive owner of that land. They made threats, they made demands. They were desperate to stand in the same room as the person who held their entire future in his hands. What they never realized, what their own arrogance made it impossible for them to even conceive, was that the man they were so desperate to find was the same man they had thrown out of his home, the same man they mocked for his simple life, the same man they shamed for inheriting what they called a broken storage unit. He turned to face the judge fully. "Your Honor, the owner of Eleanor Holdings, the man who held their fate in his hands all along, was my client, Liam Parker." The truth hit the room like a physical explosion. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then Sophia broke. It was not a cry of sadness, but a raw, guttural shriek of pure, undiluted rage and disbelief. "No!" she screamed, lunging to her feet. Her carefully constructed facade of cool superiority shattered into a million pieces. "It's not possible. You did this. It was you!" She tried to scramble over the barrier, her hands clawing the air as if she could physically tear the truth down. "That money is mine. It's ours. You tricked me. You owe me." Two bailiffs moved in swiftly, grabbing her arms. She fought them, her body thrashing, her voice a torrent of curses and accusations. Caleb just sat there, completely broken. He was a statue of a man, pale and lifeless, his empire of smoke and mirrors having vanished before his eyes. All the condescension, all the smug superiority was gone, leaving only a hollow, pathetic shell. Liam watched her break down, and for the first time he saw her not as a monster, but as something small and pitiable. Her entire world had been a fantasy, and it had just been ripped away. He felt no hatred. He felt no satisfaction. He felt nothing at all. He was finally, truly free of her. He stood up. He didn't look at her again. He gave a slight, respectful nod to the judge, who was staring at him with an expression of utter astonishment. Then he turned and walked calmly out of the courtroom, Mr. Thompson at his side, leaving the sound of Sophia's hysterical screams and the wreckage of her life behind him. The door swung shut, and the noise was gone. There was only quiet. The aftermath was as complete as it was predictable. Sophia was declared bankrupt. The penthouse and all its contents were seized by creditors. She and Caleb were hit with a barrage of lawsuits from their furious investors, accusing them of fraud and fiduciary negligence. Their names, once whispered with envy in the city's most exclusive circles, were now synonymous with failure and disgrace. The last Liam heard, they were living in a cramped, run-down apartment above a laundromat, their days filled with bitter recriminations and arguments over dwindling funds. They had lost their money, their status, and worst of all for them, their audience. Liam, in stark contrast, did not embrace the life of a flashy millionaire. He had seen firsthand how corrosive the pursuit of wealth for its own sake could be. He honored his grandfather's legacy not by hoarding his inheritance, but by using it to build. He established the Arthur Parker Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to providing scholarships for students attending trade schools and vocational programs, a tribute to the man who believed in the power of skilled hands and honest work. Then he finally pursued his own long-dormant dream. He founded Bedrock Designs, an architectural firm with a unique mission to design and build beautiful, innovative, and sustainable, affordable housing communities. He didn't want to build glass towers for the ultra-rich. He wanted to build homes for families, places with dignity and light and green spaces. His first project was a revolutionary multi-family complex built on one of his grandfather's smaller, forgotten plots of land. It was a masterpiece of thoughtful design, integrating solar power, rainwater harvesting, and community gardens. It won numerous architectural awards, not just for its beauty, but for its social conscience. A year after the divorce, Liam stood on the bustling construction site of his second project. The air was filled with the sounds of saws and hammers, a symphony of creation. He was no longer the hesitant, hollowed-out man who had sat grieving in a church pew. He was calm, confident, his eyes clear and focused. He was dressed in jeans and a work shirt, a roll of blueprints under his arm, a pencil tucked behind his ear. He was covered in a light dusting of sawdust, and he had never felt more at home. "The load-bearing calculations for the central atrium are ready for your review, Mr. Parker." He turned. The voice belonged to Ella, the project manager. She was bright, pragmatic, and had a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She didn't look at him with awe because of his wealth, which she knew about, but with respect for his vision and his hands-on approach. She saw him not as a millionaire, but as a builder. "Great, Ella. Let's take a look," he said, his own smile coming easily and naturally. They unrolled the blueprints on the hood of his truck, their heads close together as they discussed the intricate details of the structure. In that simple, professional moment, a new and healthy connection was being forged, one built not on ambition or status, but on a shared passion for creating something real and lasting. As he looked out over the rising framework of the building, at the people working together to bring his vision to life, Liam finally understood the full meaning of his grandfather's gift. The $91 million was just money. The real inheritance was the lesson his grandfather had so carefully and patiently laid out for him. True power wasn't in what you owned or the lifestyle you flaunted. It was in your character, in your resilience, in the quiet strength to endure and to build a life of purpose. The broken storage unit had not been a punishment, nor had it been a simple treasure chest. It had been a test. It was a key, not just to a desk or a fortune, but to the man he was always meant to be, and he had finally unlocked it.